I am a licensed and registered dietitian, and I work as the director of sports nutrition for Sam Houston State University, which is in the FCS division. So I was actually just moved up 4 days ago. I became director. So I was only working over our football team. And that was fantastic. They just won a national title, which is really great.
Wow.
And so it led us to, or it led our athletic department to kind of see the progress with the nutrition. And they decided to open up that opportunity to all athletics, which is great. So now I'm overseeing all athletics. And prior to that, I worked as a Spanish speaking assistant to the New York Mets dietitian at the time, who is coincidentally now a firefighter, which is very interesting. So she runs nutrition for a lot of firefighters and goes out to different places and chats with them. So she's a fantastic mentor. And so she let me kind of work with all of her Spanish speaking clients and her Spanish speaking major league, minor league ball players. So got a little bit of that baseball aspect as well. And prior to that, I was at Liberty University, so another university out in Virginia. And prior to that, University of Arizona was kind of where I originated from and where I got all my undergrad experience and my nutrition internship experience. So that's kind of where it all started at University of Arizona.
Is it correct that you played soccer there as well?
I did, yes. I
Okay.
played soccer there as well. Mhm.
Gotcha. And then I guess just starting kind of from even earlier than that, where did this interest in nutrition start?
So I, like many people in 2000, was 2009, kind of giving you my age, but I didn't really understand that nutrition could be a career, like a lot of people at that time. I didn't really know, much less that it could be kind of intertwined with sports. I had no idea. So I actually started my undergrad education as a translation and interpretation major. So that's where all the Spanish speaking comes from in my stories. And so I want to hone in on that as well and kind of reach out to different audiences. So I really thought I would be working for NATO or something translating and interpreting. So as you mentioned, I was an athlete and I had our college coach bring me into his office and kind of tell me that I was very thin and that I needed to put some weight on. And I know I have a lot of strength coaches listening, so I just want you to know, everyone that's listening, I had not lifted a single weight before I went to college. So that was sincerely a miracle that I made it that far. But I was a first generation student in a first generation, college seeking Latino immigrant. So my parents had no idea, that I needed to be in a weight room. And this is back in 2008, 2009, where I was one of those females with that mentality of, oh no, if I go in there, I'm going to get huge. If I have protein, I'm going to get huge. Like this really is 2009 me. So I freaked out when my coach told me that because I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? So first person I spoke to was my strength coach and he meant well and he helped me as much as he could. And he kind of said something along the lines of just eat more. And that was rough to follow for me because I wanted to gain weight to kind of appease my coach, but I was also afraid of putting on, bulk. So there was not really anyone to guide me. And I think that's where the nutrition aspect stemmed from. I think one of the older girls kind of took me under her wing and suggested that I take a nutrition class. And I did. And of course, first love at first sight, fell in love, took the course, and that was that. And then I kind of did a double major and it was just so fluid. Like it changed everything I thought about nutrition, taking that class and understanding what a calorie was and that protein wouldn't make me huge. It's
Yeah.
just those little things.
Yeah, it's so crazy just to think back on my own understanding. I mean, in my family, it never was like this thing like watch what you eat. Like, this is what protein is. This is what all that is. I mean, we always ate pretty well. We had home cooked dinners, which I think is definitely rare, especially these days. But
Mhm.
I mean, there was like such a long period of my life where I just didn't even know what a calorie was. Like, kind of
No.
like you were saying, like I heard the word, I knew like, oh, this has this many calories, but I had no idea. Like, I was like, oh, well, wait, what's the difference between that and a carb? Like, I thought,
Yes.
like to
Yeah.
me, it was like they both start with C. They kind of sound the same. They're in food. Like,
Exactly.
it was such a weird, now just looking back on it, such a weird time for me now. Like, this, you know, opposites of my understanding. And certainly I'm not to the understanding of you or anyone, super educated on it out there, but just it is crazy. And the fact that there's still people with this same, you know,
Right.
same understanding that we had, but it's
Right.
so hard for us to understand that. I think now that we're in this kind of, a lot of times in this bubble of like what we know, we just assume that everybody has this baseline. And I think that's where it's so hard to get across to just the everyday person, because you're trying to not in a mean way or bad way, but it's just the way the word kind of trying to dumb it down. But you don't even
Right.
realize the way that you dumb it down is like still levels above what somebody that has no understanding, levels above what they
Absolutely.
would actually understand. But I think it's so interesting when I get to speak to people who were in, college athletics, high school, college, moving on, if they do their strength conditioning experiences. And you mentioned how you have basically, had none in high school. You never touched a weight, but you still made it to a pretty high level of collegiate athletics. And it's so interesting to me, like what the potential of athletes could be if they all
Absolutely.
kind of had this standard, here's not that you could really enforce it on the diet side, but here's what you should probably be eating, and here's how you should probably be working out. Like, if we could get all athletes to do that from, high school and so on,
Mhm.
just the different, I think, potential that athletics could have. And
Right.
there's definitely different things I want to talk about in regards to that. I don't want to talk about those things quite yet, but moving to your own experience, like I mean, you kind of mentioned a little bit, but what was that? I mean, what was the first thing you kind of said whenever, a coach says you need to eat? Because I think that's, like you said, for
Uh,
a female athlete, that can sometimes be a little bit intimidating.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so frustrating when I will never forget the layout of his office, that situation. I think it changed the trajectory of my life, really. And I'm so thankful for it now, but I mean, tears, because to have an adult male, who's your coach that you really respect, say, your body is not where it should be, it's a very difficult thing to hear, especially when you get to that level in college where, you've been doing you've been training for your sport for, 15 plus, however young you were, years, and you're thinking, I'm doing all this right. I made it. And at the time, if you kind of go back far enough, 2009, the college soccer for females, that was it. Like, if you didn't make it to the US national team, you weren't going to continue playing. There was no women's leagues, there was no payment. So that was like the big league for us. So I'm thinking I made it. And now here someone is telling me that, no, you're not going to get on the field unless you change this.
Yeah. That's the sporting world has just grown
Mhm.
to encompass, like, it kind of like you were saying back in 2000, early, to mid 2000s and 2010 and so on. Like, the sporting world, I feel like, was just so much smaller, as in you had like the NFL, the NBA, MLB, NHL, but now there's just like so many small teams out there. And actually, I have a friend who plays soccer, and he didn't play in high or in college. He didn't play
Mhm.
Division 1. He played for the club team, but now he's on a team. Like, he continues to play. And
Right.
it's just so cool to where sports have kind of gone a little bit more accessible, a little bit more small town in a way, and it's
Right.
something that you can do for so much longer now.
And get paid is the nice
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, that's another thing. Just
Right.
having that accessibility is big as well. Um,
Mhm.
but whenever you decided to make that transition and start getting into those classes, those nutrition classes, What's kind of the biggest realization that you had and just the kind of the mindset shift?
I think it was a combination of things. I think the biggest realization that I had was going back to those kind of elementary kind of principles where what is a calorie and how many different types of those things are there? And then how many different types of those macronutrient things do I need? And then it was kind of grown into when do I need each one of those? Because I think that's where I start with my athletes now. And looking back, it makes sense that that's what I needed to learn first to kind of continue on and dig deeper into vitamins, dig deeper into supplements and all of that. But first understanding, when should I have this? Why should I have this? How often should I have this? So.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's another big thing. I think a lot of people are just simply confused on not
Everywhere.
just not just like the what to eat, but like when to eat. Cause you always hear the thing about don't eat before bed, don't eat,
Oh gosh.
eating breakfast is
Yes.
good, it's bad, and all these different styles of eating and diets. There's just so much information out there. But from a sporting perspective, what's
Mm-hmm.
what's really kind of your overarching goal as a somebody who is concerned about obviously the athletic performance, but also about the athletes, own diets and own wants as well.
So I think it kind of goes along with my major kind of life, motto is to leave it better than I found it. So with a lot of athletes, because they have varying levels of knowledge, as we were mentioning before, some athletes come in and they've had maybe some home ec style classes, or maybe if I get lucky, a nutrition course or a nutrition, speech from another dietitian if I'm super lucky. So I think just reminding myself at the end of the day, or else I'll go nuts, that I need to leave it better than I found it, and I will have at least started something, like planted the seed there. But ultimately, my goal is to provide and utilize that evidence-based nutrition to enhance their performance, and not just enhance their performance because then they think that we're just enhancing performance. It's not just that. It's aiding in their health and overall wellness, so that when they either continue on to be athletes professionally or they retire and they go into the workforce, they know what decisions to make and they have that solid kind of foundation. And I mean, we start at zero with athletes as well. There's not a big difference than, someone who goes on Instagram and starts just searching, calories, carbs. That is where our athletes start too. So they're by no means experts when they get to college, unless they've had some training beforehand.
Yeah. And kind of the same way that the strength conditioning is so spotty, I feel like the nutrition as well. And that's actually something that I thought of recently as well, is something you just said about like teaching them past athletics. And if we could get that into high school, because obviously the the filter for athletes goes way down from high school to college, but getting that same information into a high school athlete's brain would just be, I think,
Right.
so cool to see
Such a
once,
tool.
once they go out into the world and stop playing sports, it's still there and it's still something they can, have a positive impact and help other people just by what they do, and I think just by creating more positive role models on how to eat, it will do a lot to change those that don't get that information.
Mm-hmm. And I want to, along with that, and now that you brought up kind of the strength and conditioning aspect, is building off of that, wanting to help our athletes understand nutrition is one of my bigger roles is working alongside athletic training, because a lot of people don't see this connection. They just see a nutritionist or a dietitian just kind of sitting in an athletic department in their office, kind of taking appointments, but there's a lot more that goes on. So I work with our strength coach, I work with our athletic training staff, and say an athlete has a concussion, we have a nutrition recovery protocol following that concussion. If an athlete, maybe a good example for our football guys is if you're having summer conditioning and you're an athlete who was maybe told, like I was, maybe you need to gain weight or drop some fat, what do you do then? So I want to know and understand the strength and conditioning schedule, what their workouts look like. And that way I can modify my recommendations on what I'm going to have the athletes select in terms of their food, or if they choose to go out to eat, how I can change that to kind of mimic the strength and conditioning schedule. So I'm not just kind of guessing.
Absolutely. I think that's a massive advantage if you can have that, because otherwise, you do have to kind of go off of almost of a reaction to what's happening instead of preparing for, oh, this is, they're going to be doing a lot more conditioning, so they might need to do this, eat this, specific type of food a little bit more during this
Right.
period of time, instead of, like you're saying, seeing people like lose weight and then trying to, recover that weight instead of maintaining it. So yeah, that's
Mhm.
definitely, I think, a great way, a great point to make. Do you have any, you personally, do you have any time to like mass talk to the athletes, on a team at one time?
Yes, so I do a few different, now that I've switched over to all of athletics, I'll have to be a little smarter about how I do it. Our head coach is really trusting with me. If I ask him for 3 minutes after practice, he'll let me talk to them. He'll let me talk to them. I mean, obviously not on game day, but but in the days leading up to practice, if there is something that I need them to know, if that, it's going to rain that day and we may have a rain delay like we did in the national title game. We had like what was it, like almost an over an hour rain delay. So they had to be prepared mentally to have a snack during that time. That was something they're not used to. It's those instances where he lets me kind of step in and I talk to the team as a whole. Otherwise, I'll talk to them in groups. Sometimes I talk to them in like by class. So every freshman class that comes in, I want to meet with them, and I have like a 4 to 6 session kind of nutrition Zoom, and we cover the varying topics. And we have an upperclassman come in and talk about how nutrition impacted them, just very briefly, and how it helped them become a starter, become a captain, what have you. And so that gets our freshmen to sort of buy in and say, okay, I need to fall in line here because that's what this guy did. And I want to be in that. I want to be in that position. So I better pick up. So as soon as we tackle those kids early on, they usually start to fall in line and follow those recommendations. So that's with COVID, obviously it has been a lot more Zoom than I would like and a lot less hands-on than I would like, but a lot of group. I have met with every single one of our football athletes one-on-one. I know maybe a lot of dietitians don't do that at universities because they have, a full department, but at, the last 2 years, I've only had football. So I was able to meet one-on-one and establish those relationships with every single athlete.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's cool to have that kind of almost like brief course in nutrition to have that coming in. That's, I think, a
Mhm.
really, really good idea. Something that I'm interested in, and I think a lot of people are, and you kind of touched on it right there with the snacking aspects, like whether it be for football, for any sport, or for just like the everyday person wanting to go get a good workout in, get some fuel in their body beforehand. What's a recommendation for somebody to have a little bit before a workout?
So I think we overcomplicate this a whole lot. And I think a part of that is social media complicates that a whole lot. It boils down to you need to go work out and your body needs energy. And your energy will come from carbs, and it will come from carbs the fastest. So that's like simple, bare bones kind of energy. And at which point the starchy grains and the carbs, they're all going to be broken down to the simple sugars. But sometimes you don't have that time. Sometimes you need my favorite is a Rice Krispies treat 15 minutes before. Now, everyone kind of freaks out when I say that because they're thinking, oh, no sugar. But this is when it's appropriate. It's right before your workout. You're going to go in. You need that quick burst of energy. You need a quick digesting carb. You're going to use that energy. That's it. And then you go in and go back to the rest of the day. Maybe you shouldn't be eating Rice Krispies the whole day, but right before a workout is definitely appropriate. So I would just recommend that we don't overcomplicate things. So some of the things that I use with my athletes are Rice Krispies. I know in the NFL you've seen even some people have, Marshawn Lynch does Skittles. So there are dietitians that do Skittles too. We do fruit snacks. We do, some guys have digestive, issues, and we're still kind of working through that. So they even do juice, like 100%, just any juice that they can get a hold of their hands on. We do applesauce pouches, especially for high schools who don't have a lot of money. Don't overcomplicate it. You don't need all of these, expensive supplements. Start with pretzels. Start with something easy that you can have donated and get some fuel in the body and then go from there.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's something that I think just the, like you said, the complication of it all and the supplementation, I feel like it's can be helpful, but I feel like at the same time there, it's almost like a campaign to confuse, so it's like, we don't know
Right.
what to do. So buy our product and we can kind of do it for you. Like we'll have the answer.
Exactly. Exactly.
And one other aspect I think is interesting is like this huge pre-workout, revolution that has come on, and I guess I don't know how long, and maybe the last few years, but just how everyone seems to really rely on pre-workout before every single workout. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Right. So here's a quick activity I have my athletes do. I have to, with all supplements, just because they have to be tested for banned substances. So there's two brands that I recommend, just since we're talking. It's the NSF brand and then the Informed Choice brand. So I look for those seals. But I'll have athletes bring them in and I'll have them read me the ingredients. And I'll have them identify the ingredient that they think is giving them energy. So usually, usually they don't find carbs on those guys. Usually the ingredient that they find is going to be caffeine. So depending on that pre-workout, depending on what time of day it is, I would say, so do you think this is an appropriate way to fuel yourself for what you're about to do? Yes or no? And then I have them explain it to me. So all of my athletes know that this question is coming when they come see me with their supplement. So they've almost kind of taught themselves to look it up ahead of time and know what they're going to say to me. So usually my answer goes something like, well, how about we handle the way that you're eating first? And then if you still would like to use an ergogenic like a caffeine, for instance, we can talk about that when we've made sure that you're fueling appropriately and you're actually eating food the rest of the day, not like you're coming in and you're, downing an energy drink just because you're just about to pass out, because that's not going to do it for you as an athlete. You need more sustenance, you need more discipline throughout the day to get you through that workout and have it be effective for you.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that, like, taking care of the food aspect first, because I have had a little bit of experience interning as a strength conditioning intern, and it was at a high school, so they didn't have a specific nutritionist or dietitian on the staff, but just generally speaking, the coach pretty much every day would ask the athletes what they had for lunch, remind them after, saying don't eat pizza and burgers for lunch, eat something good, eat something, don't go after this workout and go get, Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, whatever, don't. And then during the weekends, or before the weekends, don't eat, just microwavable foods, all weekend, like all those little things. But it's interesting to me how, athletes will be so ready to jump on, and it's definitely just more than in college athletes or high school athletes, but so willing to jump on, spending so much money on supplements, but say they don't have money to buy, good stuff at the grocery store.
Right. And that, to be honest, that all kind of stems from a place. So I've actually been doing a lot more research into why athletes make that decision. And there's so many factors that go into it. And a lot of the times, the athletes, not all of them, of course, the athletes are arriving to college. And if you can think of it in a few different ways, they're either leaving home where parent or caregiver prepared everything for them and had it for them at practice, or they're coming from a family that was short-term planning and maybe low income. And that's how they've lived their entire lives. And they've lived on, I need to just buy the next meal because that's all that I can afford. Or I need to go to the nearest food pantry because that's all that I can, that's all that I can do right now. So a lot of them, it's a lot of it is me trying to figure out, what background they had and then kind of meeting them where they're at. It's difficult for sure to address that. That's why whenever I have an athlete that comes in and says, "Can I just have a meal plan?" I joke with them. I say, "Sure, come here, sit down," and then I just haul them into a 45-minute long conversation about their past and about what foods they like, what foods they don't like, and actually tailor their plan to them, and not, instead of just handing them, a sheet of broccoli, rice, and chicken.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it has to fit a person's, not just what they can afford, but also what they'd like to eat. It's kind of the same thing with a workout program. It's like there's not this perfect, 4-week workout program out there it's perfect for everybody or probably
Right.
for anyone really. But it's the same with nutrition. You really have to dig into so much when it comes to when you're going to be eating, when you're going to be working out, how much you're going to be working out. I mean, this obviously isn't something I'm telling you new information, but just, there's so much that goes into eating and properly fueling and
Right.
recovering and I'm not sure, from the perspective of when your athlete's working out, but do you see any like negative side effects to athletes who may use some type of stimulant before they work out, and then the sleep side of thing, they can't get to sleep and recover?
Right. There's actually been some more recent, and there's maybe if you've been kind of active on social media or your listeners have, there's been a little bit more recent push on when to have caffeine specifically and when to have it in terms of a nap. I think I've seen a lot more of that, and people sort of recommending if you have, 1 to 2 cups higher end before your, 30-minute nap, it will help you kind of wake up after your nap. So there's like very little tiny nuances, but in general, I would just recommend my athletes to. I actually had this question from an athlete last week, so I'm glad you asked me. He was taking, perfect example, he was taking a multivite that has caffeine in it. And so what ended up happening is he was having evening practice and he was taking it too late in the day. So then it was definitely affecting his sleep because I said, "Well, have you changed anything? Are we using a new supplement?" And then we landed on those new multivitamins that he had purchased that had, it's almost being a detective at this point, that had the caffeine in them. And then he switched them to kind of earlier in the day, and it was fine. So it's, I hate to say the blanket statement of, it depends or it's different for everyone. But I mean, with caffeine specifically and the two kind of genotypes of people, that one, it affects them a lot, and the other one, it doesn't affect them as much. It just kind of depends on how often you have the caffeine and how used to having it you are, and what mode it is and how much it's in there, and whether it's coming from something that says proprietary blend, so you don't really know how much is in there. They don't tell you how much caffeine is in there. That's where it gets really sticky.
Yeah, that's where, yeah, it is. It's almost interesting that that's even like allowed, but who knows? It's an interesting world of supplements, and I think actually I was
Right.
talking about it just here a while back, and there's definitely pros and cons to this idea of not regulated. I think from a social perspective, it could be a positive, but from a short term one off, it could be, definitely a negative experience, especially with
Right.
something like caffeine, where it is like, somebody like me, I get super like jittery and
Same.
I feel like I'm about to, like, the way I describe it is like I want to like simultaneously run a marathon and take a nap.
Yes. Just exhausted, like anxiety, but so much energy at the same.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing with me. I wish I could drink more coffee.
Yeah, it's funny because today actually I was looking at some stuff that showed how coffee, and this is coffee as in probably not your double shot of caramel, whipped cream, all this other stuff. Just
Yes.
coffee as in, black coffee
Caffeine.
has
Right.
such a really good impact on the body, on the heart, on something else. It had an impact on it, something else. But decreased overall death. This is one thing I really remembered. It decreased death by any instance by 12% compared to people who don't drink it. And
man,
crazy. It's like,
we're
what
missing.
I know. I need to like figure it out. I need to do
You need to
something
send me
about
the study because I want to look at it and convince myself that I am a coffee drinker now.
I know. Somebody needs to not tell Starbucks this. they'd be all over that one. Heck, it might have been sponsored by Starbucks. I don't know.
Oh yes.
Oh man. But getting back to like athletes who come, and you talked about freshmen, what are some of the like maybe the biggest misconceptions and maybe some like funny misconceptions that you hear when you start educating these athletes?
I'm trying to think of a funny one. Maybe it'll come. I think the first one is the notion that everything has to be black and white. Like the whole debate between what is a good food and what is bad food. And just give me a list of all the good foods and give me a list of all the bad foods. That's really how they come in. And the first thing that they do is question the pre-workout snacks that I offer, the ones we just talked about. And it's good. I want them to do that because I want them to come in and I want them to ask me. And one of the first speeches that I have with the team is anything you see on TikTok that has to do with nutrition, we will talk about it. Send it to me. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's research it. Let's debunk it. Or maybe there's good information. There's also good information out there. So it really depends. I think my favorite thing is when they come in and say something like, but Miss Susana, fruit snacks have fruit in them, right? That's why you're giving them to us.
They're healthy.
No, no, not really.
That's funny. Oh, good.
So it has a lot to do with understanding labels, as silly as that sounds. Like the people genuinely think that there is actual fruit in fruit snacks. And at one point in my life, I'm sure I thought that too. So there is nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. They say silly things. Honestly, they say the silliest things all the time.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I think I've actually done an episode on here on the weight room very, very early on about understanding the difference between the front of a package, being just marketing and branding and pretty much probably 100% false right. Compared to the back where at least there's, even if it's confusing or even if it's very general recommendations, at least there's, probably mostly something to gain from that information and learning how. I think that's another crucial thing is just learning how to flip that thing over and read it and understand what it's saying and understand that like an athlete is, especially a college football athlete eating a 2,000 calorie diet, like that's probably not 80% of your protein right there in that one little thing. So
no,
that to me, the general recommendations are a scary thing, but it's something to start off with.
Right. And that is a huge misconception is also the whole sodium topic. And, oh no, I can't, that's too much salt for me. And they've got, the rings of salt and they've got, white all over their face because they're salty sweaters. And here I am thinking, oh my gosh, you're going to cramp or something's going to happen to you. I need to make sure that you're getting more salt. So it all kind of comes along with that aspect of where are these kids getting their information from and what are they choosing to believe? It's rough out there.
Yeah. And it's actually funny you mention the salt because I was on YouTube and you know how YouTube goes. They just know what you want to watch, but
right.
But I was scrolling through this thing on sodium and this one guy, I can't even remember who it was now, but he was very successful in powerlifting or something. And he was just talking about like all the salt that people probably should be eating. It was like a crazy amount compared to like
normal standards. Yeah.
It's crazy because it's like, what is it? 2,000 milligrams is the recommendation.
Like 2,500 max. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's like, try to eat less than, and he was like, you should be eating at least twice this much if you're working out or like 3 times. He's like, I eat so much salt per day. He's like, I got to keep my heart pumping, like all these different things. And I'm like, you're probably a little bit right on what you're saying, but the way you're saying it is probably not the best approach.
It's gonna make some kids want to drown themselves in salt there, bud.
I know that's the way it goes on the internet. It's like you either have like the person who says if you eat a grain of salt, you're gonna, get hypertension, or if you eat, less than 10,000 milligrams, you're gonna, also your heart's not gonna beat. So it's tough.
There's no in between, really.
Yeah, and kind of like you were saying with TikTok and finding good information, and it is cool. The availability to information now, though,
right,
compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago, where you just kind of go with what your family or your sports team is doing. Like there was such a little, influence from outside of your little circle. And now you can find cool things on the internet, hopefully kind of like this podcast, where you just get a little bit of
little tidbits of,
a little different message here and there. But when it comes to that, though, like, that you have the misconceptions, but what are some of the biggest struggles? Just like, really where people are struggling with their diet when they come to you?
For college athletes, so I'm a little different in that I was taking non-collegiate athletes as well. So I have college athletes right now. I've got a couple of pro athletes, and then I have just your regular average Joe kind of trying to. So it's a little different. For college athletes, it's the biggest misconception is that their scholarship covers all of their costs for everything. And this sounds silly, but for an athlete who needs upwards of 6,000 calories a day, they can't just go into a dining hall when it's open twice a day and sit and eat 3,000 calories and then be expected to go run at practice. Like that's impossible. And I think coaches expect them to go just kind of stuff their faces at the dining hall and expect them to you have money for that and you should be fine. But it really is difficult for maybe not at a FBS, Alabama, but it is difficult for the rest of collegiate athletics to make sure that they're eating enough calories. I would say maybe 85 to 90% of the athletes that walk into my room is that they don't have a schedule on eating. They have a schedule for class. They have a schedule for study hall. They have a schedule for meetings, for film, for lifts, for everything. There's two things that they don't have a schedule on: when they have to sleep and when they have to eat. And so those are the two things that they just kind of want to be free on. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't make the best decisions. So, I mean, just today I had some athletes that came in and, let's do a kind of a diet recall of your day just to see how things are going. Said, what have you eaten today? It's 4:00, mind you, in the afternoon. They've had lift, they've had practice, haven't eaten anything, or have had a bar all day because they were busy, because they had meetings, things. So I would say for like college athletes, what they struggle the most with is an actual schedule in terms of allotting themselves enough opportunities to eat enough calories. And secondary kind of like an afterthought is, well, if you're not doing that, then you're definitely not getting your protein every 3 to 4 hours, as is recommended, to enhance that muscle protein synthesis with all of the activity that you're doing. So
gotcha.
It's a double whammy for them. Yeah,
man. And it's so true. You talked about the schedules of everything except sleep and what you put in your body, what you eat. And it's that freedom that they don't get anywhere else. And
right.
I can't imagine, being that structured and having class and sports events and training and all this other stuff. I mean, of course you want to optimize those two things, but it's like, where do you get to be your own person?
Freedom? Yeah.
And
that's the answer I get. This is the only thing I have for me. Yeah. So that's you kind of have to feel for them, but then it's just tough. They have to make a decision.
Yeah. And what do you think, if you had to kind of ballpark the estimation on this, what do you think is the percentage of athletes who come to you who want to make a different diet and change things up and really stick to that?
I would say there have been a lot. When I first got here, it was a lot more of, hey, coach sent me to come sit in your office and you give me a diet. But I will say over time, I don't really have a lot of kids who come in my office anymore just to pretend. I think that after we got the upperclassmen and they saw those physical changes and then they saw those changes on the field and then other sports kind of started buying in and they see the physical changes, they see the energy changes. I think that the buy-in has been so great that I rarely have someone, I would say maybe 90% of the time, if someone comes and sits in my office, it's because they know that I'm going to hold them accountable and they're ready to do it. And you can tell when someone isn't really, quite ready. And I'll offer them, I'll say, maybe let's take a step back. Are you wanting to do this? What's holding you back from attacking this with the same mentality that you're going to attack out on the court, out on the field? Like what's holding you back from changing this one thing that might be holding you back?
Gotcha. And what do you do to try to keep, not from a pressure standpoint, but just from a helpful standpoint, try to keep them accountable and try to, keep them on the path?
To be honest, just be around. The more they see me, I'm rarely in my office. The more they see me out at practice, the more that I can interact with them, the more I'm at meals, the more that they see me present and the more that they see me care, which I genuinely do. I think the more buy-in they have because they feel like I actually care. I have an open door, open phone policy. This is crazy, but I have athletes text me at all times of the day when they're, at Chick-fil-A, when they're at the store. What should I buy, this one or this one? Like, I don't know which one's better. I'm not really sure what to grab at dinner. It's just kind of an ongoing discussion. And I've noticed that the closer I am with them and the more maybe I provide them in terms of, my time, I think that they're more willing to kind of stick to their nutrition. And of course, if they see those physical and those energy changes, if they start feeling better, then obviously they're going to buy in a lot faster. So I just try to hit those early on and make subtle changes that I personally know will have a really big impact, maybe on let's lessen that nap time throughout the day so you get more sleep. And they'll say something like, well, you're just not eating enough in the morning. And then we'll change maybe 2 or 3 things. And they see that change. And then they want to continue. They want to do more.
Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to know as well, the not just the athletic performance, but the the performance in the classroom as well. I'm sure that would also be affected by changing your diet and
absolutely
just how that affects the overall kind of athlete to student, transit, because it's so hard, I think, to transition going from like, okay, I'm an athlete. It's almost like I'm at the top of what I'm doing. And now I got to go kind of just sit in class. And I can imagine that would be pretty challenging.
I ask them often, did you fall asleep in class yesterday? Like if I've been working with them and one of their goals is to maybe not fall asleep in class, but have more energy. I'll say, when was the last time you fell asleep in class? And they'll go back and they'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't fall asleep in class this week. So that's a positive. We'll take that as a win on my end.
Yeah, I think that's a cool thing to think about it. And it's just so interesting. Like if you look over the history of college athletics and how it used to be like no one cared about working out, and then working out became so serious, and now it is what it is. And then, now it's like food is the new thing that people are getting really excited about it. And I think what's on the forefront is like the recovery aspect of things. Right. And to me, it's like, how long until we have a sleep coach on each, college team and creating sleep programs. And because I think, that really, and it's funny to hear it. And it's probably for people out there, it's like, no way. But 30 years ago, who would think that you would need somebody to specialize in food just for, college sports? But like we know the importance of it now. So I think just and maybe it's not 30 years, but maybe in 10 years or whatever, I really
Mhm.
think we're going to have on every team a coach or a specialist that specializes in recovery and sleep.
Right. There's a lot going through right now. There is a sleep doctor out there, and I know that she works with most, if not all, of the professional teams, and she does a lot of college kind of outwork, and she's fantastic. I believe her name is Mita Singh. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, I completely agree. I That's the next big move, I think, in college athletics, is that sleep component, just with people not understanding how much the circadian rhythms and what they are and how they impact everything that we do.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is.
Mhm.
It's a world that we just kind of like float in and float out of,
Yes. Yes.
but we have so much like um unknown, like especially to like just the everyday person, like so much unknown on why you should probably get into a better sleep routine, like a nighttime wind down. Probably shouldn't
Mhm.
watch TV, after before bed for a certain amount of time. Probably should, stay off your phone.
Right.
Probably should, you know, lower the lights. Probably should, do some type of, lowering of temperature. All these different things. Like I think I really do think that's the kind of the next step there. But um,
Agreed.
we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on the supplement side of things, but
Mhm.
for either, and there's definitely going to be two different probably answers, but for either athletes or, non-college athletes or high school athletes or pro athletes, like what are the supplements out there? The ones that are
Big
kind of like
dogs.
surefire supplements
Right.
that you should not be certainly taking for sure, but like that if you're looking for maybe that next boost, like what are
That you
those
should
for you? What
consider.
are your recommendations? Yeah.
I think, and I mentioned it earlier, with anything, making sure that it's free of banned substances, because there's just so much out there. And making sure that you speak to someone who knows how to check it, tell the difference, and see the dosage and see the efficacy. So for me, I want to say, and I want to start with maybe creatine. I think that one is it's extremely well studied. I know a lot of people are still kind of fearful of it, but in terms of enhancing performance, muscle mass, improvements in speed and strength at the same time, you kind of have to go with creatine. And of course, it will only work as well as you pay attention to the rest of your diet and having a food first approach, because without that you're still lacking. There's too many holes for it to kind of do its job. And I know that there's a little bit more research coming out now about it helping protect like brain structure and functioning as well. So maybe even past the sense of like enhancing the performance, maybe now taking it to kind of the suppressing like a secondary brain injury from collision out on the field, or like even like pre-concussion, maybe it can help down the line. And I know, like I said, they're still doing a little bit of research on that, but for me, I would say creatine is typically the next big one I would go with. And that's considering obviously like my population. And I generally will work with pro athletes or collegiate athletes. And then the next thing I would say would probably be something more along the lines of a vitamin. I know that it's a little more difficult, and there's a little bit more of a thought concept of I need to get tested before I take any kind of vitamin. To be honest, there's so many athletes that are deficient in so many things without them even realizing it. There's just no way that, and I know because I watch my athletes eat. I see them eat their breakfast, their lunch, and their dinner, and I'm watching them eat, and I'm thinking, oh, they're missing, all of their vitamin this, all of their vitamin that. And even in Texas, it's really hot, really humid. Kids want to stay inside, so there goes the vitamin D aspect. So I think filling in where we can in terms of vitamins and deficiencies is going to be important, specifically like vitamin D, iron. So I think kind of filling that in and adjusting it with food intake. And then if we need to supplement, we can. And then kind of further down the line for me are other things like beetroot and like nitrates that will help dilate the blood vessel and allow for that oxygen to flow. That is something that we typically look at when competing at those higher altitudes, like we just did last week at NAU. And so that's kind of where I would play around with those things, whether they are completely evidence-based or not. I mean, the verdict's kind of back and forth still out. And then there's the whole notion behind, well, which brand is better than the other? At which point, you know, if it's going to be a placebo, it's going to be a placebo. So, and then I think the last one for me I have to mention would be tart cherry juice that we typically use. And it's more just because it's easy and athletes like juice. So it's an easy win. There are a lot more athletes than I expected are taking melatonin. When I first got here, I realized that there were a lot of athletes that were taking just melatonin. How much, they had no idea. So at least if I try to encourage them by saying something like, well, you know, tart cherry juice will at least have a little bit of that melatonin that you're looking for, and we can find an appropriate one that has been tested for banned substances, I'd rather you give that a shot to help aid in maybe a little bit of enhancing your sleep and your recovery. So those are kind of the bigger ones. And then, you know, of course, there's also all the whey proteins and whatnot, but I'm a dietitian, so I have to say, you know, I want to take a food first approach, and I don't think you need those as much as you would need a creatine. That's a little bit more difficult to come by.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the tart cherry, actually, I've heard recently as well about this benefits for sleep. I think that's what you're referring to. So
yes.
yeah, and it's cool. I actually, before I knew the benefits for sleep, I was actually taking it in the morning after my workouts. So maybe that's why I was always tired. But but yeah, there's so many cool like things now being researched just by so many different people that, you know, I think we're really going to, for the people who want it to take advantage of those things, at least we're going to have some really cool you know, opportunities to capitalize on things that we've never probably heard of for most of us. You know, most people probably never have taken or drank tart cherry juice or, you know, anything like that. It's definitely, and to me, it kind of like brings back this notion of like the whole like superfood.
Yes. Yep.
This idea of like superfood. And, you know, that's one thing to me. It's like, is it superfood or is the food we're eating so garbage that like anything we eat that's like that's probably like a little more natural is just like taking us back to where our baseline level.
Right, exactly. It's like, well, when was the last time you had any cherries with anthocyanins in them? Probably not. Probably not in the last week. So here you go.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's there's so much marketing that goes into diet nutrition. And like I said at the beginning, the supplements now, like trying to, not necessarily in a bad way, but trying to like get their share of that kind of marketing space. And I think that kind of makes things a little bit confusing as far as kind of like you said, what brand, you know, is this supplement really doing anything for me?
Right.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff out there when it comes to food, when it comes to supplements. But if you had kind of like one key piece of advice for someone, you know, an athlete, whether they be in high school or college, like what would that piece of advice be regarding their diets?
I would say just to seek professional help. And it sounds very broad and like a very easy recommendation, but who you receive the help from is going to make a difference in how it impacts your performance now, but also past your athletic capabilities. What someone hands you, what information someone gives you now is really going to dictate kind of how you mentally respond to it, how you physically respond to it, and everything in between. So I want to just recommend to, even if it's not for me, obviously, that you seek someone who you have been following for some time, that you know what their background is, what their education is, similar to how you would look for a strength coach, right? You're not just gonna take advice from any strength coach. You want to make sure that your strength coach knows what they're talking about, that they have experience in the field, that they've actually coached, and it hasn't just been, them posting pictures of themselves and coaching themselves up, right? That they've actually helped other tangible, real people, and have made a lasting impact. So,
Yeah, I think that's good advice, because I think there's such this mental side to food. We can kind of get stuck in bad habits, and that can lead to just bad outcomes when it comes to that kind of thing with eating disorders and everything like that. So I think just seeking that good advice leading to creating healthy habits and
right.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. So really do appreciate you coming on tonight. And
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
yeah, it was fun. It was good to get to talk to you, get to meet you, and
Same.
just kind of learn a lot really myself, just about how things work from that end of things, and hopefully people can kind of gravitate towards this kind of episode, learn a little bit and then go learn more, yeah. Once again,
Absolutely.
thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.